Yeah, so I know y'all have heard my story before. I'm just gonna be very brief and talk about turnout, why we need to vote. But Cindy and I worked together going back to 2007, 2008, 2009. She was the person. I mean, she's the person to know in Douglas County, but she's also the person to know in Fayette County, my home county. So I feel very fortunate to be able to hear with you. And I also had a chance. Some of y'all, if you watched President Trump's speech in Cobb County earlier this week. I was really excited to see Chairman Jones at that speech, and it was wonderful to see him on his road to recovery. I obviously think about him quite a lot, so I know we all do as well. So I just want to speak, because we're all here, we have the popcorn going, which smells really good. I just want to give you kind of a state of the race as it relates to turnout and where we are 5 days, or now 4 days into voting. Today's the 5th. So across this congressional district, and again, I represent the western part of Douglas County, but across the district, we are the #1 Republican district in the state when it comes to turnout. We've got 9 Republican districts. We lead the way, so people are very energized in our district to get out and vote, which is incredible. But yet still, we're only at about 10 or 11% turnout, and that's fine. We're gonna keep adding to that. Every vote that goes in adds to that number. But to show you kind of the challenge that's before us, we're still projecting an election in which 2 out of 3 people vote, 1 out of 3 people do not vote, which is incredible to think that you could have 33% people in our country decide not to vote in a presidential election. And when it comes to the primary and runoff elections that we just had this past year, I know I've said this before, but in the primary we only had 11% turnout for Congress, and the runoff we only had 8% turnout. So my job is to go around and try to do everything I can to encourage and incentivize people to get out and vote. And President Trump's doing his part. He obviously came on Tuesday to Cobb County, and I expect, well, he's going to be in Gwinnett County on this coming Wednesday. And I'm also very hopeful, I'm not going to spoil anything, but very hopeful you'll see him close to my hometown in Peachtree City at some point before Election Day. But the challenge before us is how do we encourage people to go out and vote, and I'm just gonna weave into my remarks. There are 3 things, the 3 motivating factors to encourage people to go vote, and likewise the 3 factors that are gonna decide this election are the economy, immigration, and foreign policy, in that order. That's what voters across our country care about, and you could not draw a greater contrast. And for what it's worth, to give you some motivation, Kamala Harris and her campaign feel this slipping away, and you can see that by their change in strategy. They cocooned her for like a month and a half after the Democrat convention, and now she's going on Brett Baier, failing miserably. If anybody had a chance to see that interview, she showed up 15 minutes late so she could truncate the interview as best she possibly could. But they feel this election slipping away, and when you go on the news, you can see the analysts freaking out. They're like, well, Trump's stronger than he ever was before. And I think it's in large part because of those 3 issues: the economy, immigration, and foreign policy. On the economy, you have a very clear contrast. With inflation, President Trump has a 3-pronged, as do I, if you elect me to Congress, 3-pronged approach to help put our economy back on track. And the first thing that you're going to hear a lot about is the expiration of the Trump tax cuts, which expire in 2025. And for anybody that filed anywhere in our country, but especially this state, back in 2018, you had a 2 to 5% reduction in your individual tax bracket. And that's going to expire in 2025. So we've got to do our part to make sure we reenact and repass and make permanent the Trump tax cuts. And I think the Trump tax cuts are one of the reasons why our economy flourished over those 2 years before COVID hit. Also, if you just want a funny aside, if you ever want, and you should challenge me and everyone else running for office to really lower taxes, you should move tax day to October 15th, just 3 weeks before the election. And I guarantee you, every candidate's going to be talking about just how much they cut taxes. So tax cuts, Trump tax cuts, #1. #2 is deregulation. For anybody that has a business, small business, works in or has to deal with the burdensome regs that the federal government puts upon you, deregulation is one of the most important things we can do. I worked for President Trump for 4 years, first to last day of his administration. I served in the White House by his side. One of the things he tasked me with doing was going department by department, agency by agency, to cut regulations. And he promised in 2016, if anybody remembers his famous campaign speech, right around the time of his famous Drain the Swamp speech, but his pledge was, when I get into office, for every regulation on the books, I'm going to cut 2 existing regulations. So what did we do? How was our scorecard? For every regulation on the books, we cut 8 existing regulations, and that's exactly what he's promised to do if he comes back into office. Because for anybody, again, that's had to deal with it, you have a lot of unelected bureaucrats that regulate, and it stifles economic growth across our communities, across our district, across our state, and certainly across our country. So tax cuts, deregulation, and last but not least, but the most important thing that a lot of people forget when we talk about inflation is energy costs. And President Trump wants to unleash America's energy potential, as do I. When we were working together in the White House, we approved pipelines, we approved permits, we did everything we possibly could to harness the energy that God granted this wonderful country. And for whatever reason, when the Democrats come in, first it was a war on coal, then it was a war on natural gas. They always declare war on American energy production. We did not in the Trump administration. So if we unleash America's energy potential, we deregulate and cut taxes, we will get back to that record economic growth that we experienced in 2018 to 2019. That issue settled. I think it's very clear the contrast. And by the way, never before have we had a clearer contrast in 2 candidates, because you have the most liberal Democrat presidential nominee in the history of their party, and truly a common sense conservative in President Trump. Economy's clear. On immigration, also very clear. We all know we had one of the most secure borders in the history of our country under President Trump. And one of the things that I'm very excited about, if you send me to Congress, I'm disappointed we couldn't do it in this current year, but I hope one of the first things, if you elect me to Congress, that I can do and achieve is to work with President Trump to finally pass legislation that requires American proof of citizenship when you vote in an American election. And I'm excited about that because it's a 90% issue. But think about this, so 90% of our fellow Americans support that issue, including almost a majority of Democrats. But when you really drill into it, 0 Democrats voted for that when it came to the House floor. Why is that? Because Democrats want illegal immigration and illegal immigrants to cancel out your vote. So very important for us to pass that. We've got to turn off the incentivization cycle that leads to all the immigrants pouring over our border. If they don't have access to Social Security benefits and Medicare benefits, if they don't have access to the benefits you're entitled to as American citizens, you may start to see that disincentivization. But right now, they want to come across the border because they know they're going to get treated incredibly well. So that's the economy, that's immigration. Foreign policy, we don't talk about this enough. Donald Trump was the first president in nearly half a century to not start any new wars. And I think that's something that's really impactful when you think of the endless war cycle we've seen in previous presidents and previous administrations. No new wars, very clear contrast. So when you go economy, immigration, and foreign policy is very clear. And the last thing I want to close on, and I had a chance to debate my Democrat opponent just about a week, I guess 6 days ago, last Sunday on Georgia Public Broadcasting, but it was like a real focal point within our debate is this idea that if y'all have heard me speak before back in March or in June, it's what I spoke about before, which is I want to start moving departments and agencies outside of Washington, D.C., because I firmly believe that will do 2 things. I think it will take away a lot of what we find to be unbelievably liberal policy coming out of unelected bureaucrats. And if you think about it, here's my pitch. If you think about it, in DC, you've got 95% Democrats. Donald Trump will lose DC by 90% this election cycle, in large part because Democrats overwhelmingly control Washington, DC. So if that's where you're pulling from your federal workforce, it's only natural and it's only expected that you're going to have very liberal policy coming out of DC. So in the Trump administration, we started moving departments and agencies outside of DC. We moved the Department of Interior, big component of it, to Colorado, and I know it was successful because as soon as Biden came into office, he yanked it right back to DC. And if you think about it logically, and just let's think about this as a team and as a group, if we moved the Department of Agriculture to Georgia, I think we all agree we'd have far better policy for our farmers, our cattlemen, our ranchers across the state. If we moved the Department of Homeland Security to the U.S.-Mexico border in Texas, and every employee that works in the Department of Homeland Security lived on that border, I think you'd have the most secure border in the history of our country. And if you moved the Department of Justice to Alabama or West Virginia, I promise you they never would have indicted our president and our next president. So when you think about it in total, we've got to do our part to move departments and agencies outside of D.C., and nobody's been able to really prosecute a case to me as to why we shouldn't do that. My Democrat opponent in my debate said, well, I worry that people won't have an opportunity to walk down the street and talk to each other. we live in an advanced technological state. We can get on the phone, we can get on Zoom calls. We all had to do it for 4 years with the whole COVID stuff. So I think it's a really good idea, and it's something President Trump has talked about and something I really want to lead on. If you were to ask me, what do you want to accomplish? I want to pass citizenship proof when you vote. I want to make sure we do everything I just mentioned on that economics agenda, but I really want to start to see departments and agencies move outside of DC, something I'm very proudly campaigning on. But the close is, we've got to do our part to get out and vote, because I know you're going to hear this a lot, but if you think about it, statistically, if you look to your left and right, statistically in 2020, one of you did not vote in 2020. So we've got to do our part, and I think the way to do that, and if for anybody that operates a small or medium-sized business, you know that the strongest marketing tool is a personal referral. So that personal referral, that personal touch, we see this from some of y'all that may be door knocking, that personal touch means everything. And people estimate that you yourself can influence up to 20 to 25 votes on your own, regardless of your network or whatever else, just because you call people that you know, friends with, in your church group, whatever. But if you think about it, in this room, we've got about 100 people. If you influence 20 people, that's 2,000 votes from this room alone. And that can make a real difference. And I promise you that's what the Democrats are doing, because they are freaking out right now because they see every single trend going against them and every single trend showing that Donald Trump is poised to have a far greater victory in 2024 than he did in 2016. So they're going to be working overtime. We've got to do our part too. And one of the things that I look forward to, and I'm very grateful for, we've got Jared and Stan and Veterans for America First. What they're trying to do is raise awareness and also incentivize and motivate and encourage people to get out and vote, because that's why we're here. That's why we're doing the job we're doing, is to tell people, if you go out and vote, you can make a difference in this election. And I know not one of you wants to wake up on November 6th and be like, man, we could have just done a little bit more in Douglas County or Carroll County, if you're from Carroll. We could have just done a little bit more to change the outcome of this election. So I'm going to do my part, encourage everyone to do yours, and I'll just close by saying next week, if you want to come, I'm bringing Jim Jordan to Carroll County. We'll be in Carrollton on Tuesday around noon, and then he's going to go down to LaGrange with me, and then we're going to go down to Columbus to wrap up the day. And then, as I noted, President Trump will be here on Wednesday. If you want tickets to that, I think you can go online, but regardless, he'll be here on Wednesday, and I anticipate the president coming back multiple times to our general area here in Metro Atlanta, because he knows as does I that this state, 16 electoral votes, you cannot win the White House without Georgia. That's the role that we play. So I know everybody wants to watch the movie. Thank you for letting me speak, and I'm really, really grateful, and hopefully have an opportunity to see you all on Tuesday if you want to come out and see Jim Jordan. Thank you all very much.